The miners going down the coal mine on the morning shift of April 5th, 2010 had no idea that they were seeing the sky for the very last time. They carried out their usual routine of the day, saying goodbye to their families and leaving for work, not knowing that it would be the last time they would ever do so. Suddenly there was a huge blast, and then everything turned to dust. What happened, and how did it happen? Let's delve deeper to uncover the reason behind this sudden tragedy that forced many families to lose their loved ones forever. A blast that left officials and families with lingering questions and grief. We invest our utmost efforts into bringing you stories of unbelievable real-life incidents. In this video, we're going to be sharing a mining incident that caused an unimaginable outcome that you won't believe could ever happen. We try our best to provide you with well-researched information. If you want to support us, please take a second to click to subscribe. This will help and motivate us to bring you more valuable content to your fingertips. Raleigh County. Raleigh County is among the largest of West Virginia's 55 counties and a star coal producer. It and its surroundings have been home to indigenous people. It all started when a German from Orange County, Virginia, John Peter Salling, led an expedition down the New and Kanawha rivers in 1742. He noted rich seams of coal along the way and named the river the Coal River, which has its headwaters in Raleigh County. Raleigh County was created in 1850, and Beckley was named the county seat. Raleigh County is rich in bituminous coal. Mining of its coal deposits began in the 1890s and then finally reached Beckley in 1901. After the Virginian Railway started building a new line in 1908 to the ports of Virginia, coal production doubled and then tripled within a few years. The development of the coal fields brought an influx of population. The number of inhabitants rose. Homes, businesses, schools, and churches were built as the demand rose higher. West Virginia coal fields now had an economy based primarily on retail, service, and tourism. Raleigh County has been heavily involved in the coal mining industry, and as a consequence, it has been the scene of numerous deadly incidents, most of which have been very severe. The Upper Big Branch accident in Mont Coal is significant as it led to an unimaginable disaster. The Upper Big Branch mine at Mont Coal, a longwall mine, was operated by Performance Coal Company, a subsidiary of Massey Coal. Mont Coal is a coal town and unincorporated community in Raleigh County, West Virginia. One of the earliest Mont Coal coal camps was established around 1930. Colcord Coal Company uncovered mines 1 to 5 and then started its coal mining operations in Mont Coal early in 1918. Later, in 1945, Armco Steel took over those mines and then ran them until 1984 when they were sold to Peabody Coal Company. The residents of Mont Coal enjoyed their town because of everything it offered: a post office, a restaurant, barbershop, scout troops, a family doctor, and a store. It was located on the Big Coal River, ideal for many people. In 1991, Peabody Coal closed mine number 7, which led everyone to think that now was the end of coal mining operations in Mont Coal. But that is when Performance Coal Company, a subsidiary of Massey, began reworking and continued the operations. The work continued, as did a series of negligence that ultimately rocked West Virginia with disasters that hit one after another. The Upper Big Branch mine explosion. It was, no doubt, a century of successful mining operations in Mont Coal County when everything came to a screeching halt as the Upper Big Branch mine exploded and shook the entire coal community of West Virginia. The blast happened at 3:27 p.m. on the fateful afternoon of April 5th, 2010. It is considered one of the deadliest mine blasts, as 29 miners perished right in the coal dust. The explosion happened almost 1,000 feet underground, and the unlucky miners were dead long before they could even be given a chance. It again thrust mine safety issues back into the spotlight and highlighted Massey Energy's presence at the back end. The Upper Big Branch explosion is considered one of the deadliest, taking away the lives of 29 miners. West Virginia Governor at the time, Joe Manchin, was quoted as exclaiming it as horrific, specifically, quote, "That's an explosion that is just beyond proportion." The explosion. The explosion at the Upper Big Branch South Mine at 3:27 p.m. local time on April 5, 2010 rattled the surrounding area. It's located about 30 miles from Charleston, near the community of Montcoal. The mine was operated by the Performance Coal Company, a subsidiary of Massey Energy. As per the initial investigations, the root cause of the explosion remained unknown. However, it was speculated that the blast was ignited from an unknown source with high methane levels contributing. There are typically two main causes of explosions in coal mines: coal dust and methane. The process of getting the coal creates a huge hazard because it produces these two explosive products. If an energy source comes in contact with either the coal dust or the methane, it can cause a huge explosion. Coal mining operations alter the geology of the earth. One is taking minerals that have been there for millions of years and extracting them, which creates a big void in the earth. So it creates a huge pocket under a huge mountain that then wants to collapse in on itself. That's the way gravity works. 25 men were initially identified as killed, but then 4 days later, 4 missing men became officially unaccounted for. It is considered one of the worst mining disasters in decades. Later, when proper investigations were carried out, there were 2 deemed causes for the explosion. The explosion began after gas, mostly methane, was ignited by a frictional impact as the shearer was cutting the sandstone roof, or by rock colliding with steel supports, or other rock while falling from the sandstone roof behind the long wall shields. It is deemed more likely that the long wall mining machine, or the shearer, ignited the methane. Emergency rescue operation. First, emergency response teams were immediately dispatched from Boone County and surrounding counties. This included over 20 ambulances and 3 helicopters. 1 miner was evacuated by helicopter, and at least 2 others were evacuated by ambulance. Emergency crews initially gathered at one of the portals for the Upper Big Branch mine in Berkston, West Virginia, about 2 miles north of Montcoal. According to Kevin Strickland, an administrator with the Mine Safety and Health Administration, 25 people were reported dead and 4 unaccounted for. On Tuesday, April 6th at 2 a.m., high levels of methane and carbon monoxide were detected, as speculated earlier. This forced the team of rescuers to go further underground, delaying the search. Crews had to drill into the mine to release the gases and then test the air. The process was time-consuming, but critical to furthering rescue operations without causing even more accidental fatalities. 3 1,000-foot shafts were drilled to release the methane and the carbon monoxide. 11 of the dead miners had been identified by that time. 14 bodies were still in the mine, in addition to the 4 missing people. Family members of the mine workers were angry after learning their relatives were dead. The whole county came to a numbing halt. The families were grieving and anguished. They wanted answers from the mine owners. Investigators later condemned Massey Energy for failure to properly maintain its ventilation systems, which allowed methane levels to increase to dangerous amounts. Now imagine the distress of a father who has just lost his son. Well, miner Tommy Davis lost his son, Corey. He recalls the last conversation and words that he heard from his son. Quote, "I said, 'I love you, buddy.' He said, 'I love you too, old man. Now I'm going to go cut me some coal.'" Davis also lost his brother and nephew to the explosion. On the morning of Thursday, April 8th, the rescue working team prepared to re-enter the mine to continue searching for the 4 missing miners, hoping against hope that they might somehow reach the safety chambers within time. The operation was resumed in rescue mode rather than recovery mode, although there were no indications that any of the 4 missing miners were still alive. As per Massey's confirmation, the mine was equipped with rescue chambers stocked with first aid kits and oxygen tanks. The 2 safety chambers in the mine were inflatable units made by Strata Safety Products with air, water, sanitary facilities, and food sufficient to support more than a dozen miners for about 4 days. They could possibly support 4 miners for longer than 96 hours, though only if any miners had managed to reach the chamber after the blast. Unfortunately, by midnight at around Friday, April 9th, the rescue workers announced that the remaining 4 bodies had been found, and the total death toll rose to 29. None of the miners were able to make it to the safety chambers. Poor conditions in the mine caused rescuers to walk past the bodies of the 4 miners on the first day of the rescue operation without seeing them. So Saturday, April 10th, the mission mode was changed from rescue to recovery. The 22 bodies remaining in the mine were removed over a span of 3 hours. Out of all the 29 miners who were killed, 28 were Massey employees, and 1 was a contract worker. Account of a survivor. One survivor reported that he first felt a blast of air hitting him right in the face as if it were a physical blow, followed by a rush of hurricane-force winds, one after the other. Debris was flying everywhere as he escaped the mine. The blast was so deafening that it was heard and felt for miles. A miner working at another site approximately 7 miles away from the blast recalls the blast and the visuals that he witnessed when it happened. Quote, "It was just like your ears stopped up. You couldn't hear. It was like being in the middle of a tornado. Rail lines were twisted like pretzels, and mining machines were blown to pieces." Investigation probes. The investigation process was delayed due to the mine's large concentration of toxic gases. Mine Safety and Health Administration investigators had to wait for over 2 months to enter the mine, finally entering on July 2nd, 2010. The independent investigation team released a report on May 19, 2011, which condemned both Massey Energy and MSHA for the blast. Massey was strongly criticized by the report for multiple failures to meet basic safety standards outlined in the Mine Act of 1977. The report clearly stated that, quote, "A company that was a towering presence in the Appalachian coalfields operated its mines in a profoundly reckless manner, and 29 coal miners paid with their lives for the corporate risk-taking." The investigation found that the company's ventilation system did not adequately ventilate the mine, causing explosive gases to build up. Also detailed in the report are allegations that Massey Energy threatened miners with termination if they expressed safety concerns. This enraged the families to such an extent that they called for action from the U.S. government. The report criticizes MSHA inspectors for their failure to issue a flagrant violation citation. If issued on a timely basis, it would have caused the company to pay around $220,000 in fines. Investigators claimed that this citation was of utmost importance, keeping in view the history of past violations smoothly carried out by the Massey Group. This made it necessary, given Massey's failure to meet basic safety protocols, that the investigators found it quote-unquote disturbing that the violation was not issued. The failure to issue flagrant violation citations led to the failure to notify the miners and their families that they were working in a mine that had not met minimal safety requirements. Had the citation been issued to the mine owners, there would have been the possibility of saving the people from the disaster that happened in the first place. The report states that Massey used and exercised its power, quote, to attempt to control West Virginia's political system. The report cites that politicians feared the company because it, now quoting, was willing to spend vast amounts of money to influence elections. There was no doubt after the investigation probe that Massey intentionally neglected safety precautions to increase profit margins, and the report clearly cited the negligence. One miner went as far as saying this on record, quote, "Mine officials buy off judges and have political connections. They disregard safety rules. They get away with it. And most of all, they work you to the bone." Another miner said, quote, "When you work for Massey, you give your life to Massey." A former leader of the Mine Safety and Health Administration, Davitt McAteer, had harsh words for the disaster, citing lessons unlearned from the 2006 Sago mine disaster. Quote, "That was the defining theme of Sago. That was one of the first things that we did not do enough. We know how to remove methane and control dust problems. And the fact that we had an explosion with methane or dust suggests that we are not doing enough to protect miners." Grievances of the miners and their families. As the blast echoed through Montgomery County, a wave of grief and numbness fell upon the whole community. Families were grieving their loved ones, and families of the rescue workers and other officials who were fearing the same fate for their loved ones. The news that was coming out was distorted, and the families directly hit by the disaster were kept in the dark. The people were angry and felt betrayed. To add insult to injury, relatives of the missing and confirmed dead expressed their anger that they were not being notified directly by the owners, the Massey Energy executives. In fact, they found out most of their information from the company website or government sources. Michelle McKinney, daughter of a missing employee, burst out in anger. She was alerted of the incident by a local school. She complained, quote, "They're supposed to be a big company. These guys took a chance every day to work and make themselves big, and they couldn't even call us." Well, what more can be said about the ethics and morale of a company that deliberately forbade miners to attend the funerals of those who lost their lives in the disaster? Miners stated that they were warned of reprimands or losing their jobs if they took time to attend funerals. A former miner asked, quote, "Is a lump of coal that valuable to you that you can't even give the miners a day off to mourn their friends?" A miner's wife told the World Socialist website, quote, "These are the miners' brothers. They know them better than their own families, and they can't even attend their funerals." Government reaction and response. The Upper Big Branch incident was a magnanimous disaster. The number of lives lost due to sheer negligence and the way the whole scenario was carried out caused an uproar at the national level. The government of the United States stepped up to review the situation. State and federal leaders, including Governor Manchin, United States Senators Robert Byrd and Jay Rockefeller, United States Representative Shelley Moore Capito, and Cecil Roberts of the United Mine Workers of America all expressed condolences to the workers' families. On April 5, 2010, Governor Joe Manchin and President of the United States Barack Obama spoke over the phone. The president expressed his condolences and offered federal assistance. Memorial services. President Barack Obama and then Vice President Joe Biden arrived in Beckley, West Virginia on April 25, 2010 to attend the memorial service to pay respect to the miners who lost their lives in the Upper Big Branch explosion. President Obama gave a eulogy wherein he mentioned each one of the miners who died in the tragic accident. A 48-foot or 15-meter black granite monument with life-size silhouettes of 29 miners etched on the front was built in Whitesville, West Virginia to commemorate the unfortunate miners. It is named as the Upper Big Branch Miners Memorial. A web memorial was also launched in January of 2013. A big question. A big question that arises when viewing the magnitude of the Upper Big Branch and similar disasters is, what can be done to prevent future disasters happening in the coal mines? The answer is that the mines have to be properly engineered and ventilated to mine coal safely. Yes, it is an engineering challenge, but it can be done properly. Lots and lots of oxygen needs to be blown into the mine at all times so that workers can breathe, and the toxic mix of methane and coal dust doesn't reach a level where it can explode. It is possible, provided there is enough roof support in the mine and the gas level within the mine is constantly monitored. So in conclusion, safety precautions are a hard-earned right paid for with the blood and sweat of those miners. Safety professionals often say that safety laws and codes are written in workers' blood. One day, nearly 30 years ago, an outdoorsman decided to try real caving in Tennessee's deepest underground pothole, Bull Cave. He found himself severely unprepared for the dangers of the underground waterfall within. On the way out, he had to battle for his own life as rescuers bravely fought to save him. This is the story of the Bull Cave Rescue. The Curious Caver. In the early summer of 1990, a 23-year-old man named John departed on a trip into Bull Cave. He was new to splunking, and he was already hooked. John was supposedly an outdoorsman who hiked along the woodland trails of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. His travels took him to show caves, heavily modified caves equipped with lights and other amenities for staff-guided tours, the kinds of caves families visit on RV trips across the USA. Usually only beautiful caves or short caves with wide open passages are chosen to become show caves.
These caves need great attractions, like the 3,121 square feet of over 200 million cave pearls in Gruta de las Canicas, the flowstone cascades of Lechuguilla, or the gypsum flower petals of Double Bopper Cave. Incredible rock formations like these inspired John to visit more caves. But they didn't have the same thrill, the same sense of adventure, discovery, and freedom that a hike in the woods can bring. He didn't want to tour caves, he wanted to explore them, conquer them. So he decided to explore one of Tennessee's most impressive caves firsthand, without all the walkways, souvenir shops, and crowds of people. He began researching caves in the area, trying to find something that would be as awe-inspiring as the show caves he visited. He found that Tennessee has hundreds of caves, and many are spread throughout a single line. And along that line, he found the longest and deepest cave in the state. The grueling distance of Tennessee's longest cave system, the Cumberland Caverns, sprawls out across 32 miles. This cave may have been on John's list, but roughly 30 years prior, landowners stole the most impressive portions of the cave from the general splunking community and transformed much of it into another commercial cave. That's when he discovered Bull Cave. Bull Cave, sometimes called Bull's Cave, is one of many caves littered throughout Cades Cove in Tennessee. Cades Cove is a huge valley between sections of the impressive Great Smoky Mountains. In the past, the valley was a trail used by Cherokee natives, and later by John Oliver and Lorena Fraser following America's War of 1812 against the United Kingdom. Cades Cove was once covered by loose collections of silt, clay, and sandstone until massive glaciers and vast flowing waters eroded these lighter rocks down to the limestone beneath. These limestone layers are roughly 700 million years old, which gave the rock plenty of time to accumulate cave networks deep underground. This glacial runoff created hundreds of caves in and near the valley, like the famous Gregory's Cave. Gregory's might be the most popular cave in Tennessee, but Bull Cave gives it a run for its money. Bull Cave is the deepest pit in both Cades Cove and the whole state of Tennessee. Its maximum explored depth stretches down 924 feet into the cold, dark crust of the earth. Even though it's mostly a vertical cave full of dangerous climbing portions, Bull Cave is also fairly long, with 2.3 miles of dark, cramped caverns. John probably didn't love the idea of sleeping overnight in an underground passage, but he thought he could definitely handle a climb. The mountains around the area gave him plenty of opportunity to get climbing experience. He wouldn't be going to the Olympics anytime soon, but he was strong, and he could hold his own through the cave's vertical shafts. On the day of his excursion, he probably gathered the usual outdoor gear: a drawstring athletics bag, a plastic water bottle, some toilet paper, trail mix, some brand new hiking shoes, and some chalk. He met up with an experienced caver who would guide him during their journey. The cave guide thought John was physically fit and capable of handling the challenge of Bull Cave. He thought the upper climbing portion was easy enough to traverse both up and down, so if they ever reached a sticking point that John couldn't overcome, he could easily just climb back up. The two trekked through the Tennessee wilderness and ducked under the rocky opening of Bull Cave. The pair connected their harnesses to anchors and metal clips in the rocky walls near Bull Cave's first drop. At the cliff, their headlamps glinted off water gently spraying from a hole several feet below them near the opposite side of the cylindrical drop. The water looked tame as it misted on the rocks below. They gazed down at the dark hole extending into the empty void beyond their sight and started to climb. Their descent was slow and methodical. John was experiencing difficulty, but he was making progress. They reached the first pitch and continued downward. As they climbed down, the water started getting heavier. John kept pushing himself harder, and they reached hundreds of feet down into the cave. But as they kept going, John was getting more uncomfortable. He wasn't expecting to get drenched. So they started to climb back up Bull Cave. Rescue below the Bull Cave waterfall. John's laundry list was all misguided. But one of his biggest mistakes might sound strange. He should have brought different shoes. And his mistake became clearer as the waterfall got heavier. Most new footwear needs time to break in. Most world-class climbers will use separate shoes for different types of rock, different types of holds, and other conditions. Almost all climbing shoes have little to no treads to create maximum surface tension with rock. Many of these shoes are also lightweight and thin-soled to help climbers feel the rock during risky technical maneuvers. That's why underwater shoes are light and flexible. Regular shoes are big and bulky, creating more surface area, which causes higher resistance underwater. John was definitely experiencing these issues. His shoes were designed for dirt and mud, not slippery limestone. Each movement took extra effort. He couldn't rely on his footing to keep him stable, so he used his arms to force himself up the rope and over each foothold. To make matters worse, his thick, insulating hiking shoes collected water, adding to their weight. Now, the additional weight won't bother people who step in rivers on hikes, but waterlogged shoes quickly become heavy during repeated movements when climbing. Even good footholds against nice, flat rock wedged into the side of the cliff became unstable as water continued pouring from above, getting stronger and faster. His athletic gear was designed to cool off when wet. That way, if it was a hot day outside, his sweat could absorb into the fabric and keep him going. It also provided good ventilation, which is a must-have for sweaty hikes. But deep below Earth's surface, his choices were coming back to bite him. The same breathable fabric provided no resistance to the water flowing over the top of him. The outside water was cooling the fabric down faster than his body could warm it up, trapping him in a tight polyester casket as he tried to climb. So many unknowing first-timers treat caves like hikes. Most of the time, well-traversed or beginner caves can be tackled without the aid of extra gear. But if the going ever gets tough, you'll wish you invested in better gear. You might get weird looks by casuals hiking through easy caves, but if disaster strikes, you'll be ready. Assuming tame caves will remain tame is a costly mistake. Thousands of lives have been lost just in recent history to exposure, cave-ins, or other mistakes that could have been prevented with the right equipment. Unfortunately, John didn't have the luxury of regret. In this moment, his fight for survival had begun. His muscles tensed as he shivered, which made each movement even harder. He had to burn energy just to stretch his muscles out to make the next movement. The stiffness in his fingers turned to rigidity as his hands betrayed him, no longer responding to his commands to grip the rope and rock. Nearly halfway up the final shaft, he hung there in place, still tethered to the rope, but unable to safely descend down to the next ledge. John's guide had to think fast. The same waters that were turning John into a human icicle were threatening to overtake him as well. He was even less prepared than John, because he was hardened by a life of splunking in dangerous corridors. The guide glanced up at the ridge above and thought of the safety, warmth, and rest it would bring. He looked down at the inexperienced caver, barely still sitting in his harness to retain tension and his position along the cave wall. If John went down, it could be disastrous for him as well. The sudden weight on the ropes could dislodge an anchor, leading into a cascade of terrible snaps and breaks, sending them both into freefall. The icy rock below would shatter them and leave them blasted by the spray of the Bull Cave waterfall. They would both surely die on impact, or die in the cold long before rescuers could arrive. Even if they bounced or rolled off the cliff with only minor injuries, the water below would not save them. It was a shallow, fast-moving stream only a few feet deep, cradled by smooth limestone that slid and twisted into further passages that descended deeper into the depths. The experienced caver sat back in his harness and looked down at the rock, taking stock of the footholds and handholds. He developed a mental map of the route down to John, leaned back in his harness, and took a step back down the cliffside. After a few shaky movements, the expert closed his eyes and held his breath momentarily as water gushed over his face. He performed the next few movements with limited visibility, sometimes being forced to close his eyes while he was reaching for the next rock. The guide reached John and held on to him as they both went down to the ledge below. The guide took off some of his own gear to help John stay warm and instructed him to keep making noise and respond when called to. The roar of the waters would make it hard to hear each other, but the guide needed to make sure John was still conscious. The guide sprinted out of Bull Cave and contacted rescue teams. He quickly went back down to the ledge and kept eyes on John, asking him to report his condition every few minutes. As the clock ticked down, the guide kept turning around to check for rescuers. Eventually, he called down to John one more time, but this time, there was no response. The guide prepped himself to go down through the waters once more and start CPR. Just as he was leaning into his harness, he looked up over the cliff edge and saw lights. The rescue team had arrived. The guide got back up as the teams began their preparations, but he kept looking down for any signs from John. More rescuers were storming out of their vehicles toward the shirtless cave guide leaning dangerously over the cliff edge underground. They asked him for the location and status of the stranded caver, but he didn't hear them. He was listening and watching down intently. As the rescuers reached out to get the experienced caver's attention, John lifted an arm in acknowledgement of the call. He was still alive. The relief jolted the guide back to reality, and he gave them the info they needed. Over 10 rescuers got to work on the operation. They lowered a water-resistant handheld radio down to John to communicate with him while they worked. They asked him questions on set intervals to monitor his condition until the team could reach him. He could only groan. But even if he couldn't reply, the sound of helpful voices might give him the strength to hang on. Rescuers knelt down to hammer more anchors into the rock so that multiple people could descend at once. One by one, a few of the rescuers trained in emergency medicine slowly climbed down the wet cliffside to reach John and provide any first aid that they could, while other teams began the rest of the work. The crew on top of the cliff affixed wheels to heavy anchors drilled into the ceiling of Bull Cave. This sheave was connected to 2 flanges as a strong, brightly colored rope was looped around the wheel to create a pulley system. The flanges grip the rope when tension is applied to create resistance that moves the wheel while also keeping tension on the rope. The team needed to add more pulleys to overcome the weight of the waterfall. The downward force of the water plus John's weight could cause the anchor to dislodge, or at the very least, it would make it harder for the rescuers to hoist John up the cliffside. They also had to account for the lightweight stretcher they brought. The rugged material could prevent cuts and punctures, but it would also hold water. That additional water could make it harder to lift the pulley, but it could also disrupt the balance of the system. The fabric of the stretcher could bow with water, allowing water to slide from side to side under John's back. This motion could cause the pulley to lose tension or swing John into the cliffside. The bowed shape could also cause the whole stretcher to shift to one side and tip over, spilling John down onto the rocky floor below. Rescuers strapped him down and looped the straps through the ridge sides of the stretcher to limit the bottom from bowing too much. With the block of pulleys affixed overhead, they slowly lifted John up to the cliffside as his lips turned blue and his face began to resemble the pale white limestone walls of the cave. One of the medics climbed up almost in tandem with him to stay with him during the exit from Bull Cave. Once at the top of the cliff past the waterfall, the rescuers quickly split into a third team that carried him up the sloped entrance of Bull Cave and out onto the grassy forest above. It only took the team around 3 hours to rescue John. If he hadn't pushed himself to climb down as far as he did, it's possible he could have avoided this rescue completely. But thankfully, he was able to reach close to the top before his body gave out. The other rescuers who had been with him below the waterfall made their ascents, and together they cleaned up the area and gathered their gear while John was already on the way to the roadside where a helicopter awaited him. John was airlifted to the University of Tennessee Medical Center to regain his body heat and monitor him for signs of injury. Sometime after this incident, Bull Cave was closed to the public. and it remains closed to this day. John ended up with no significant injuries, and supposedly John took a long break from caving to bolster his skills and appreciate the safety of life on the surface. Today's story was a two-sided coin. John learned a valuable life lesson and survived the icy waterfall of Bull Cave unscathed, but other cavers are now barred from entry. Have you ever witnessed one of these majestic and terrible underground waterfalls firsthand? How would you prepare to tackle a challenge like this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. If you liked the video, let us know by clicking the like button and subscribing to the channel so that you can catch the next exciting story.